Systems are in place because people put them in place. And the reason that systems don't change is that the people that put them in place don't want them to change. So let's talk about it. Welcome everyone to Outsider Information. I am your host, Brandon. Hang out, get cozy, and if you're into the vibe, like, subscribe, and engage. Try to do episodes at least once a week, usually on a Tuesday, which just happens to be today. We're recording, editing, and releasing the same day. Exploration through storytelling is what I like to call this carefully curated space. So let's jump into it. Drink of the episode is Mint Medley. It is one of my favorite teas, a nice herbaceous blend of crisp mint that hits the palate just right. All right, so what do we got? The description, or at least the intro, was a little bit vague, but the title itself, we are going to be looking at the player-based draft model that exists in a couple of sports to figure out a proposed fix. Now, of the things that I do, imagining and tinkering, that's a pretty core part, but it's really also rooted in some level of realism. I don't just get brought in or talk to anybody to pitch fantasy ideas, but sometimes it's just a lot of fun to play around with systems. And in a nutshell, that is what I do, and what most consultants really should be paid to do is see a process, evaluate it, and present an alternative. Sounds easy, right? We all have ideas and solutions of how things can be better, but it's maddeningly difficult because when you've got people who are entrenched in a system, change isn't as easy as saying, hey, this is broken. Here's what you can do to fix it. If it was that easy, I think things would function a whole lot better, but not the world we live in. So that is why spaces like this exist. But where this was born from, this particular episode, it's something that I've loosely played with in the past is creating. But last week with the NBA fining 2 teams for tanking, it made it a little bit more front of mind and made me think, okay, if I was going to do something on this, what would my particular solution be? Tanking is not a new problem in any league. There is an incentive to be bad, and that incentive is you are picking high in the upcoming player draft, which gives you a chance at the best players. The important thing to realize, though, is that teams tank, organizations tank, players and coaches don't tank. And I think that distinction is important because when you look at what happens when a team tanks, you are losing a lot of games. And for players and coaches, that is held against you, especially as a coach. If you are presiding over a team that loses pretty much all of its games, even if the intent is to tank, eventually they're going to replace you, and you are building a culture of losing. And again, that gets held against you. As players, you are only as valuable as your most recent performance. And if your most recent performance was on a bad team, then that is going to potentially impact your contract negotiations when you come back to the table, because you certainly weren't contributing to winning. The draft position argument is a relevant one because when you look at how the player draft is conducted, it provides teams an easy pathway towards becoming better. You look at some of the best players in whichever league you are a fan of, it usually is the result of them finding the right player, right? Drafting the right player, and then that player elevating the franchise to new heights. It provides cost-controlled labor, and that is the result of collective bargaining, in which in the past, rookie contracts were negotiated alongside veteran contracts. They now have a slotted system where, based off of where you're picked, you are going to get paid that amount. That is the case certainly in the NFL and the NBA as well. And it provides a new young pool of talent, right? It's not a large pool, but it is an infusion in which teams can now bring in their own players and develop them. And that is the way, right? That is the way back to any level of prosperity, is a draft and develop system. It's that way in sports. And if we want to be real, it is the way in any external organization as well. Hiring people from the outside in sports as free agents blows up your salary cap, and it doesn't work great for team cohesion if you hire a bunch of mercenaries. And the same in an organization. You want to have a pipeline in which you can return to. It functions different, though, the draft in each league. There is an order-based system which exists in the NFL. It goes 1 through 32. You just win the Super Bowl like the Seattle Seahawks. You are picking 32. If you are the Las Vegas Raiders, continue to call them Oakland, the Las Vegas Raiders, and you have the worst record in the league, you are picking first overall with the chance to get the best player in the draft. In the NBA, there's a lottery-based system where it's still kind of order-based, but the first 14 teams out of the playoffs are put into a lottery, and you are given designated odds of which pick you are going to get. If you are the worst team, you have the highest odds to potentially get the first overall pick, and if you are the bottom of that 14, you have the lowest odds. It's an interesting system, but it has certainly come under scrutiny in recent years for a few reasons. The flaws with all of that. Again, returning back to tanking. There's no way to disincentivize tanking, especially if you are in the NFL, because the worst team gets the first overall pick. In the NBA, if you've got high odds to get a top pick, again, it doesn't really dissuade you. But there are other flaws that come with it. See the college model with NIL, and there are a whole lot of problems with NIL. But the core piece of collegiate athletes is you get to kind of pick where you are going, and it's not all that different with employment. I would make the argument that my biggest issue with the draft system is being picked isn't an honor. You are essentially being held captive by a team that says, we want you, and you have no choice to go anywhere else. It's not an honor. Imagine if that was you and you were wanting to go work for somebody, and somebody else said, well, instead of them, you're going to be working for us. And you are stuck here for a designated amount of time because we hold your rights. That is essentially what the draft is. You get picked. In the NFL, if you are a first round pick, you are guaranteed 4 years. If they want to keep you around, there's a team option for a 5th year. And if they want to keep you around after that, there's a franchise tag for a 6th year and potentially 7th year. So you essentially lose the first 4 to 7 years of your career, potentially with a team that really isn't all that good. We have seen a lot of teams who don't really get all that good over the course of 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 10 years. And you've got players who are there throughout the entirety of it. They use up your prime. You eventually become too expensive. They do end up cutting you loose, but your best younger years are behind you and your contract value is reduced. So the draft itself, the way it's formatted, is certainly not the best system. So let's try to fix it. All right. My proposal in order to do so is simple. Remove the lottery, adjust the order-based model. And I think this could be applied to really any sports league that wants to do it. It would then be reduced to a salary cap-based bidding system. Clearly, I've got a thing for salary caps. I've talked to them a lot, but how a bidding system would work is you go 1 through 32. I'm going to use the NFL's model here, and you could apply it to the NBA, which would be 1 through 30. And you give those teams a set amount of dollars to spend on the draft eligible players. That is how they would be able to bid on them. You would get an additional layer of choice here. Teams would also have to be really smart with the money. If you are at the top of the draft and you have the most dollars to spend, you in theory could spend all of it on one player that you deem worth it. A player then could look at that team and say, yeah, this doesn't look like it's the best decision for me. I'll take less and I will go elsewhere. I don't think it would be all that chaotic, but when you think about a system like that in place, teams could really stockpile players. It would be really dependent on pitch, on plan, and saying, hey, maybe we can't pay you as much, but you're going to get a chance to sit behind this player. You're going to get to develop, and then we're going to hand the keys over to you when it is your turn. Maybe a player wants to cash in and they don't care about really the whole draft and develop piece. They just want to play, they want to get paid, and somebody is offering them more money to do it. I don't think teams would really lose out. I don't think teams would hoard players. And I think it would look a little bit similar to NIL, but obviously with a lot more regulation in place. And it would add an interesting wrinkle to how these leagues do it. It would be very entertaining, that's for sure, but it would never happen. It would have to be built into the collective bargaining agreement. The argument that the teams would make is it would give players too much power. It would be a little bit humiliating for organizations that lost out on top players who just don't want to play for a dysfunctional team. Because again, being picked as a draft pick is not an honor. You are a hostage who's just getting paid a ton of money and potentially losing your prime years with an organization that doesn't know how to really do anything more than just put you out on the field or court. But I think this would also make parity a lot more possible because It would give everybody an equal chance to make bids and plays for specific teams. I think it would also fix the development problem where you are seeing a lot of younger players in the NBA who are coming in at 19, 20, who really aren't all that ready to play at the NBA level. I think it could fix things in the NFL where you've got development issues, especially at quarterback. And the downside of the draft specifically is you have to make a pick where you are at. If you are picking seventh and the player you wanted got taken at third, and you want to trade out of that pick, maybe a team doesn't want to trade with you. You're stuck taking a player that maybe you didn't want to take because you have to make a selection. And if you're stuck with that, that already is putting that player at a disadvantage. It puts the organization at a disadvantage. It increases the scrutiny. This could open things up a little bit in a really interesting way that, again, gives everybody a chance to make a compelling pitch and ploy as to why they are the right situation for a given player. So, um, yeah, that's pretty much it. Interesting idea, concept. Probably never going to happen. Actually, I know it'll never happen. But, okay, that's pretty much it. Again, coming out day of, so this will be out today. The AI deep dive is in progress. Was grappling with a couple of things of how I wanted to do it, mostly pertaining to, do I really want there to be more AI content out there, given a lot of the ethical concerns that we are seeing with it? The answer is still yes. I think it's valuable, but not in a way that glorifies it. So we will keep that. Their goal is to put that out by the end of the month. A newsletter will be dropping sometime next week as well. So be on the lookout for that. Other projects too, as always, check out the socials, the website, and if anything resonated, like, subscribe, and engage. The goal with all this stuff is to put a different spin on it, empower people from the outside in. That is what OIAS is all about. So on that, remember, I can't save the world, doing my best to not make it a worse place. So until next time, stay safe, stay sane, get you in the next one.